The suburban noir has become such a well-worn trope that we usually know the rhythm before the first body even drops. We expect the rot behind the white picket fence to be some grand nefarious conspiracy, but HBO's DTF St. Louis pulls a much meaner trick. It lures you in with the promise of a tawdry whodunnit and then slowly and methodically transforms into one of the most devastating explorations of middle-aged isolation ever put on TV. By the time the finale hits, you realize you weren't watching a murder mystery, you were watching an autopsy of the American soul. It's a show where the most dangerous thing isn't the killer in the shadows, it's the crushing weight of being known by everybody but understood by absolutely no one. And visually, the show is a masterclass in what I like to call domestic dread. The showrunner is Steven Conrad. He's like the brilliant mind behind the criminally underrated Patriot. If you haven't watched Patriot, there's 2 seasons on Amazon Prime. It's one of the best shows I hear no one talking about. But he takes that and takes the mundane textures of Missouri and makes them feel alien. And the score by Alex Werman doesn't use violins to tell when to be scared. It's this low frequency hum of a refrigerator or a rhythmic sloshing of a pool filter. It's just kind of ambient industrial anxiety. It's almost like the production design is obsessed with the algorithm. It's like this clean, cold interface of titular affair app juxtaposed against the messy, debt-ridden reality of the Smyrnich household. And the narrative is like a non-linear jigsaw puzzle for a whodunit. On one side, we have Now, Detectives Donna, Homer, and Jody Plum picking through the wreckage of a community pool house where Floyd Smyrnich, a gentle ASL interpreter played by a career best from David Harbour, he's incredible in this, has been found dead. The evidence is bizarre. It's most notably is a vintage Playgirl magazine featuring an Indiana Jones lookalike who turns out to be a younger, more vibrant Floyd, which I kind of saw coming. And then there's the other side. We have Then, the events leading up to this tragedy. We follow Floyd, his wife Carol, a Little League umpire who is white-knuckling her way through a financial collapse, and Floyd's best friend Clark Forrest, a local weatherman played with trademark Bateman-esque repression. When Clark introduces Floyd to DTF St. Louis, an app designed for married people looking to stray, it sets off a chain reaction of dream meetings and secret lives. But the real rot isn't the app itself. It's the fact that Clark and Carol are already having an affair behind Floyd's back. And as the investigation tightens around Clark's recumbent bicycle and a suspicious life insurance policy, the show asks a singular haunting question. Did these people kill Floyd, or did the life they built together simply finish him off? There's some interesting aspects of the making of DTF St. Louis. This started out as My Dentist's Murder Trial, and the Patrick Bateman role was originally supposed to be played by Pedro Pascal, which is kind of funny because you have Patrick Bateman playing this role like a Suburban Hollow vibe. You know, contrast that with Pascal being the internet daddy. So from what I read, in the show, there's these things called dream meetings where Carol and Clark do basically their biggest fantasies in their hotel room. Like having her sit on his face while she's making a phone call, you know, stuff like that. And apparently these were too dark for Pascal's brand, apparently, or maybe it's like a scheduling conflict since he stars in about everything. But My Dentist's Murder Trial is based on a true story, and Steven Conrad, he pivoted away from the real-life source material to make his own thing. I guess it's more ethical that way to invent these kinks rather than just pin them on real-life people. And there's a bit of internet controversy, you know, the internet has to complain about something at all times. But Floyd does match with someone on DTF St. Louis, and he doesn't realize that it is a gay man. Played brilliantly by Peter Sarsgaard, and I love this character too because he just keeps popping up through the entire miniseries. Anyway, they have this great conversation at a diner for breakfast, and eventually they make out. Now, this is the detectives like discovering this, like, oh, Floyd's gay now, but then you realize that Floyd only did it just because he didn't want to hurt his feelings. And that, in a little way, that he felt wanted finally. You have certain sections of the internet calling it queer coding, which I don't agree with. I think this is actually a brilliant depiction of how the app offers a safe space for men to be vulnerable, and in a way that society usually blocks, and shows how much of a great guy Floyd is that ultimately leads to tragedy. Now, I said it before, Steven Conrad, he created this miniseries, and he made Patriot, which is, again, I'm imploring you to check out Patriot, 2 seasons on Amazon Prime. I'm not working for Amazon Prime. It's just that good of a show. But he still has that same sort of aesthetic, but in a different kind of way. Patriot is about a CIA agent who's suicidal and wants to be a folk singer. This is more of the domestic dread route. Both have like this melancholy feel to them. He's definitely the king of the sad dad genre. Sad dad is pretty much becoming my favorite genre now. Now, the core of the show is in the duo of Harbour and Bateman's characters and their relationship. The show goes, this is a spoiler discussion, so the show goes back and forth about, did he intentionally kill him? He took out a life insurance policy and stuff. None of that. They just had a really terrific friendship. It's not exactly homoerotic, although it kind of verges on that at the end in ways. But it's just a deep, vulnerable friendship that men are kind of taught to fear. These are two guys who love each other, who really confide in each other and have like these deep conversations about their feelings. And I brought this up talking about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms on my podcast, and that how we always hear about toxic masculinity this and toxic masculinity that, and I do think it exists. It very much does. But a show like A Night of the Seven Kingdoms and now this, I think it's sort of positive masculinity, and I'm all here for it. And David Harbour, his physicality, he's just like an oafish man with a gold of heart. I mean, he might be on the spectrum, definitely, but he's wearing a fat suit as someone who has let himself go, since apparently Harbour actually took those Indiana Jones photos, which is pretty wild to me. But yeah, he is the core of this show. He is such a sweet guy. You can't help but like him. And Harbour, who I've seen in a lot of other things, I think he's okay actor. I thought he fucking killed it in this. He just has this kindness to him in his eyes, even, and the physicality of Floyd. That's really a gut punch at the end of what really happens. Then there's Linda Cardellini's Carol, the Floyd's wife. And you don't know what to make of her, of course, red herring. But she's always listening to these self-help strategies, and she's like implementing them when the detectives are interviewing her, when she's like, "Can you speak up?" And she looks like a total sociopath. But she's just a woman who grew up poor, trying to maintain control while drowning in debt. It just feels very real. And even in Cardellini's performance, she's got a lot of coldness to her, but there's like sparks here and there where she gets very emotional, like in the concert where she's talking about how much she loves Floyd. And I have to talk about the detectives. It's Richard Jenkins, the old head, and Joy Sunday. She's like the modernist who's who watches porn and knows everything about the sexuality of Floyd, or the non-sexuality. And I love their chemistry together. They were fantastic. I would watch 4 seasons of them just eating lunch in a squad car arguing about dating apps. Their last interaction in the series really makes me want to see these characters again, maybe in a spin-off. But in the finale, it's sort of a bait and switch, which totally works. It's like the anti-whodunnit. People wanted a murder, they got a tragedy. I think the suicide reveal is actually more haunting than like a secret killer. So we have the amphazine that was in his little cocktail drink that he overdosed on. Well, that was used to try to fix his Peyronie's disease, which is like the crooked dick where he couldn't maintain an erection. Clark got that for them, so it made Clark look like the murderer. So on the night he died, Floyd met Clark at the pool house. They spent the night drinking and dancing in their underwear. Floyd, feeling a deep connection, made a subtle romantic overture toward Clark, but Clark showed up knowing this might happen. All he wanted to do was hug someone and maybe get a boner. Just not in a romantic way, just to feel wanted again. But Clark, he gently rebuffed. He's said he doesn't know what he's doing, that he's so incredibly lonely. And pretty much breaks down, and they kind of embrace each other in that way. But Clark leaves, and Floyd's stepson, Richard, appeared at the window, and he pretty much saw everything. Richard had discovered Floyd's profile on DTF St. Louis app and followed them to the pool. And Richard yelled through the glass that Floyd was disgusting and didn't deserve Carol, his mother. So, shattered by the rejection from both his best friend and the stepson and the burden of the massive debt he couldn't pay, Floyd signed "I love you" to Richard, this, and then knowingly chugged a fatal dose of amphazine and then mixed into his drink. It was just fucking devastating, like the way that ended. So in the aftermath, because it was a suicide, Carol does not receive life insurance payout she was counting on to fix her financial ruins. Clark is cleared of murder, but his life is destroyed. His billboard with his face and on it and everything, it's totally destroyed. His obsession with Carol and the investigation causes his wife and daughters to leave him. And he ends up the series as a lonely, broken man. And Richard, he thought this was rock on or whatever, but Carol said that's a sign language for love and, prioritizing her son's emotional well-being over Floyd's despair. And I find there's a lot of interesting themes in this series. Highlights how routine can become a prison. I mean, these characters aren't running towards an affair. They're running away from identities they've spent 20 years perfecting. And, it's like these dream meetings too. It's not really about sex. It's about playing a character. For an hour in a motel room, Carol isn't a debt-ridden mother. She's anyone else. Of course, there was also performative masculinity and isolation, which is a major issue that we're dealing with today in society, and how different generations of men handle emotional rot. You got Floyd. He's like sensitive and literally silent because he's commuting via ASL with Clark, who he teaches ASL. Yet he's like the most isolated person in the room. I mean, in his younger days, he was a Playgirl model. I mean, it represents a version of himself that was actually seen, making his current invisibility even more painful. And Clark, he tries to life hack his way to happiness. He uses apps and recumbent bikes and optimized schedules, but he's fundamentally hollow. And it's called DTF St. Louis, and that's the app that pretty much led to this. Although it's not like the main plot, because I think it's more of a metaphor for the false promise of the internet. The characters, they believe that this app will fix the missing piece of their lives. It just creates a digital paper trail that the police eventually use to tear their lives apart. And the show draws a hard line. Privacy is healthy, but secrets are rot. And the app encourages the latter, which eventually destroys their real world foundations. And, what was the point of the ASL? Why is he an interpreter of ASL? What does that provide to the plot? Maybe it's like a failure to translate intent. Richard, the stepson, he misinterprets the meeting as sort of predatory. Floyd and Clark sort of misinterpret each other in the very end. And the police misinterpret a cry for help as a crime. And I guess the most poignant moment of communication is when Floyd signs "I love you" to Richard. The only clear, honest communication. So the fallout of DTF St. Louis doesn't feel like a cliffhanger meant to sell like a season 2. It's a miniseries. It feels like the end of a long, exhausting wake. By stripping away the true crime label and leaning into Steven Conrad's brand of absurdist melancholy, the show cements itself as a companion piece to Patriot. It's a series that understands the digital age hasn't actually connected us. It's just given us more sophisticated ways to hide from each other. In the long run, I think the bait and switch finale will be remembered as its greatest strength. It's the kind of ending that demands you rewatch episode 1 just to see the cracks in the characters' masks. It's a story about the quiet desperation of the Midwest, and like the fictional city website for Twyla, the truth is hidden in plain sight, updated in real time. while we're all too busy looking for a villain to notice the tragedy. DTF St. Louis is a difficult, beautiful, and deeply uncomfortable watch. It's a show that asks you to look at David Harbour's Floyd not as a victim of a crime, but as a man who ran out of ways to translate his heart to a world that only speaks in likes and matches. It's bleak, but there's a strange haunting empathy in its final moments. So I'm giving DTF St. Louis a 4.5 out of 5. It's on HBO Max, and I highly recommend binging it. But what did you think of DTF St. Louis? Let me know down in the comments below. YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other videos playing by my head, and I'll see you next time.